Good morning and welcome to your Farm and Home Show. My name is Joanna Coles, and this morning we're visiting with Shane Holinde. He is the outreach manager for the Kentucky Mesonet. Weather is probably the most important thing in agriculture. We're always watching the weather. It directly affects our growing season, our marketing season, all the above. But in Kentucky, it's just kind of hard to predict.
It is. I mean, we're a battleground state between colder, drier air that swoops in from out of Canada and the northern plains, clashing with the warmer, moist Gulf of Mexico air. And when the two get together, that's when we could have some big storms with some flooding rains around here. But sometimes the two don't often get together. And if they don't get together for an extended period of time, we could have these flash droughts, which we've seen a number of in recent years. So the last time we had a really long, extended hydrologic drought here in Kentucky was 2012. That was a year that will live in infamy for a lot of farmers and growers in this part of the world. Since then, though, we've had more wetter years versus the norm. Last year, 2023, was a little bit drier than average for Kentucky. Most cities saw less than 50 inches of rain, but it does seem like we've had an increase in the number of these quick-hitting droughts that often seem to occur in the midst of the growing season. Like in 2016, one started there in the fall, another one in 2019. We had two very impactful flash droughts in 2022. In the midst of that, we had the flooding over in eastern Kentucky. And then last year was almost like a repeat where we had two flash droughts, one in the spring, another one in the fall. And those were sandwiched around a flooding event over in far western Kentucky during July into early August.
And a lot of times in Kentucky, we see all the droughts in the Midwest. And we're like, in California, we're thankful that that's not happening here. But as you mentioned, they're right in the middle. And if they hit at the right time, it still can be very detrimental to our crops.
Yeah, it can. You know, we're coming out of an El Niño pattern, and basically El Niño refers to the abnormal warming of the waters in the Central Pacific, and that in turn has an impact on global circulations with weather all around, and that includes the United States. Typically with El Niño, we're drier than normal in Kentucky, although we had a wet January this past season, which was actually a good thing because a lot of the creeks and streams in the area were showing very low flows heading out of fall last year and in the beginning of January. So we were bailed out by that heavier rain, at least heavier than normal for an El Niño season. Things got a little dry in late February and March over parts of the state. In fact, we've had moderate drought, particularly over western Kentucky of late. But now with rains returning here in May, it doesn't look like drought is going to show itself, at least not in the near future.
Absolutely. And you know, when you read the reports, it talked about how much warmer, especially in the winter, that we've been in Kentucky. So when we read about it being warmer, but we have all these devastating one night or two night freezes, it's kind of like at both extremes.
Yeah, so you go back to the winter of 22-23, where just before Christmas, we had that Arctic front roll through. We went from around 50 degrees one day to below zero the next morning, and that shock to the systems of a lot of the vegetation was certainly felt for many. There wasn't that much snow to really insulate a lot of the vegetation, so that was part of the issue there. This past winter was almost a carbon copy, although this time the coldest weather was in mid-January when we had a lot of sub-freezing temperatures for days on end, and even low temperatures that were close to, if not a little bit below, zero, although it does not seem like this winter was as impactful on vegetation as last. But it seems like we're seeing an increase in the number of winters where we get the true winter for maybe a week to 10 days and then a flip to spring. We saw that this past season. By late January, we were mild, and the rest of the winter stayed that way. We didn't see that much snow in Kentucky in this past winter, and as a result of the mild temperatures coming on so early, we saw a lot of the budding and blooming of the trees, particularly the fruit trees, by the second week of February, shades of what we had back in 23. And that's when you often hold your breath as a grower about late season frost and freezes, because inevitably we had those again this year. Right around the start of spring, it turned cold, much like it did in 23. Luckily, it was not as cold this time as it was in March of 23. So damage to wheat was very minimal as a result, and damage to fruit trees also minimized as a result compared to what we saw in 23. So you can go to kyclimate.org. There are numerous links on there for agriculture, horticulture, as well as hydrology, topics, and lots of other good stuff.
We certainly appreciate you watching the Farm and Home Show. Have a great day.